Indian literature is like one grand palace of countless windows that, when opened, reflect different social pictures each time. India is a land of wild differences and unparalleled unity. The cultural and literary heritage are multi-layered and heterogeneous. Dalit movement, as uplifting the downtrodden, should invoke the memory of Sri Narayana Guru, who single-handedly almost eradicated inequality. Today, Dalit writings are not confined to one or two languages, but almost all the languages of the country. Definitely, Dalit literature is on the top in the pyramid of Indian literary heritage. Jaina creations, texts such as Jataka tales and other Buddhist treatises prove that ancient Indian literature was vibrant and diverse. So, no one language should be allowed to vanish, but unfortunately, that has been happening constantly over the past 100 years or so in the modern period. The greatness of literary heritage can be gauged by what it has done for society. From the medieval period, how it united communities through movements, gives place to variegated thoughts and schools. Hopefully, we will see more authentic and well written historical fictions in all the languages. It gives me great pleasure to be here today with all of you. Today I am going to share with all of you my thoughts on Indian literary heritage. When one mentions literary heritage, one's mind often goes to visualize country or a society's literary heritage over a long period of time. All such perceptions tend to view the literary heritage of the given society or nation as a homogeneous one. Such perceptions hold true for most of the societies and nations on earth. But in India, the cultural and literary heritage are multi-layered and heterogeneous. The reason is not very difficult to see. India is a land of many cultures, incredible number of languages and dialects, many religious traditions and practices, variegated customs and mores, and importantly, each in unique. Despite each component being unique and each tradition vastly different and at times in contradiction with others, all of them gelled into one beautiful, wonderful, fragrant whole and symphony. India is a land of wild differences and unparalleled unity. Indian culture is like a large ocean where countless streams flow into, and the final picture is vast ocean that is at times serenely peaceful and at times ferocious nature personified. Indian literature is like one grand palace of countless windows that, when opened, reflect different social pictures each time. Therefore, Indian culture is different, and hence, Indian literature is vastly different from any other literature in the world, since Indian literary creations portray and highlight wide and diverse cultural component. One more thing I would like to highlight before I proceed any further in heritage. The word heritage evokes in everyone's mind a cumulative ball of the remote past that has been handed over to the present. Such a picturization may be fine in that overall nature and objective of heritage is reflected. However, when one talks of Indian literary heritage, everything, a thing or a phase or an event or movement of very recent past is added to the heritage if such an event or creation or phase makes substantial contribution to the enrichment of the cultural frame of the society and enables the communities and sections of the society to make paradigm shifts. If we take a look at the Indian literary heritage, we have to start from the ancient times. It is so ancient from the times when there was no civilization or cultural growth in many places across the world. Indian history and culture are that ancient. So we have to look at ancient, medieval, modern, and contemporary periods in the history so that literary creations of each period and how valuable they are the development and growth of the individuals and the society. In the ancient times, we have Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas, etc. in the Sanskrit language, Sangam literature in Tamil, Prakrit literary creations, canons in Pali language, and of course, ancient Meitei literature of Manipur. If one looks at these variegated literatures, they are all different in nature, scope, and objective. Most people assume that ancient Indian literature is nothing but religious literature. The reality, however, is the ancient literary creations cover spirituality, religion, ethics, governance, love, warfare, plays, depicting kings and subjects, etc. Again, people assume that the ancient literature is just poetry. No doubt, poetry or kavya literature was dominant, but ancient Indian literature is a separate world where one can find loftiest philosophies that the world has ever seen and timeless wisdom that is ever relevant and in all cultures. Sangam literature has some of the finest love poems ever written, and Tine classification by Tamil scholars in the Revolution creation and remains so till date even after 2000 plus years. Meitei musical compositions, plays, and other literary pieces in Prakrit, including Jaina creations, texts such as Jataka tales, and other Buddhist treatises, prove that ancient Indian literature was vibrant and diverse. Medieval Indian literature is more than diversification. No doubt, literary creations started happening in more languages, more authors emerged, and more subjects covered in the period. But medieval Indian literature will be remembered for the attraction of masses of literary creations. Great saint poets are singularly responsible for this positive feature. I will come to saint poets in a minute or two. In the modern period, Indian literature is marked by two things: adoption of Western genres and philosophical stratifications, and dissemination of literature using the technology of the day. The period is also marked by the emergence of Dalit literary creations and large number of women writers in all the languages. Towards the end of 20th century, unfortunately, many literary creations in Indian languages moved away from nature, rural spaces, quality of life, morals, etc. And those creations became increasingly urban centric. However, there have been attempts in some languages to raise ontological issues and attempting to find out larger truths, if any, of life. In the contemporary period, say in the past 2 decades, majority of young writers are engaged in new genres, while there has been increasing demand from the readers for historical fiction. Genres like science fiction, fantasy, and speculative fiction are on the rise in Indian languages, away from the focus on English in those genres. So, one takes up period-wise understanding of Indian literary heritage. One can see spiritual literature, religious literature, historical literature, devotional literature, literary creations by women and Dalit writers, science and fantasy fiction, etc. Yet, all of them carry one of the many identities of Indian. I mentioned India is a land of large number of languages and dialects. Language is one of the many repositories of cultures of the given society. Primary impression of the people of language is it is a tool for communication. That is true, but language is much more than that. Language is the primary mode of cultural expression, though there are other mediums as well. While language expression culture, it also preserves the components of the given culture. So no one language should be allowed to vanish, but unfortunately, that has been happening constantly over the past 100 years or so in the modern period. When a language vanishes, it is not only a medium of communication that goes away, but also the entire cultural history of the given society. Language gets best expressed through literary creations, and Indian literary creations are very diverse. People are generally aware of the literary creations in classical and recognized languages, and at times the literary creations of languages unrecognized under constitution as literature. But there are hundreds and languages and dialects that fall outside this umbrella I just mentioned, and most of the literary creations, poems, songs, and tales in those languages and dialects are unwritten or oral in nature. Maybe that is the reason why masses are not aware of them as literary creations. Countless literary creations in oral and tribal traditions of India, along with the creations in the classical, recognized but not classical and unrecognized languages of India, make Indian literature truly vast and diverse. There may be countries that have hundreds of languages, but literary creations in those countries are not as diverse and deep rooted as Indian literature is. Apart from stories, poems, plays, and criticism, literary creations in these languages of India, especially in the medieval period, contained many texts that had direct relationship with the everyday life, such as about family, education, administration, legal matters, property, economics, agriculture, sciences, planning, etc. All this much before literature and literary landscape in most of the countries took proper shape. That is why Indian literary heritage is very rich, diverse, and stands out in the global literary landscape, whichever angle from which it is perceived. Indian literary heritage is not great, but because someone says so, or it is super specialized and caters to specific community, but it is great because of its very nature and contents, and it is unbelievably diverse and inclusive. Greatness of any heritage is not derived from that being and exclusive or privileged, or for that matter, it is being old and rare. Indian literary heritage is not only ancient and contains diverse streams, but also ever present, contains within it greatest philosophical truth the world has ever come across, sublime poetry, grand tales, is all embracing, inclusive, and has plenty of universal elements to be relevant to all times and all cultures. Now, I would like to touch upon something very unique to Indian literature, that is religious literature. Of course, all civilizations develop myths, religion, rituals, customs, philosophies, etc. But it is in India that we see the rise of diverse religious literature that stems from innate traditions and native people. Amazingly, they produced religious literature of religions that were not born here. When one puts all these into one basket, the result is stunningly vibrant cultural component. From the time of Vedas, universality of literary creations is referred to, but it is in religious literary compendium of India that one can witness it firsthand. One can easily access contributions of Hindu religions, contributions of Buddhism, contributions of Sikhism, contributions of Jainism, contributions of Christianity, contributions of Islam, contributions of tribal religions to the enrichment of Indian literature as a whole. There are many unique aspects to Hindu religious texts. However, If one were to lay a finger one or two specific elements, then one should cite the text pertaining to monasticism, that is sannyasa, and text pertaining to karma as unifying factor. One cannot find such detailed and nuanced expositions in literary creations. The treatment of these two subjects in Hindu religious texts is very special and unique. Coming to the contributions of Jaina texts, there are so many aspects and areas to cover, just like Hinduism, and the most impressive one is their deep understanding and depiction of cosmogony, and their listing some of the remarkable theories such as Sadhavada and Anekatvada and Pudagala Karma. There are many more wonderful philosophies in the Jaina literary texts. Buddhist texts, biggest contribution to the Indian thought is taking to masses the philosophy of evanescence or kshenika. However, one idea and practice that Buddhist literary text took to masses was ahimsa. Again, the Buddhist literature influenced the society away from social hierarchy and towards equality. We are in Kerala, so I just would like to mention, without covering overall contribution of Islamic and Christian texts, a couple of examples. Contribution of Islamic literary heritage in India can be best gauged from the Mappila Sahitya Parambaryam, the contributions of Benjamin Bailey, Joseph Peet, Richard Collins, George Mathen, and the host of other Christian scholars who were responsible for many works on Malayalam language are the prime examples of Christian contribution to literature. Guru Granth Sahib and other Sikh literary texts led the way in propagating the universal message of love, peace, and brotherhood that was initiated by Guru Nanak across the country. The message from these texts completely got ingrained into the masses for centuries. Though predominantly devoid of religious literature, tribal religions shaped the world around, and the same has been captured by countless authors in their texts. These texts have widened our horizons, enhanced our awareness of their world and belief systems, and increased our acceptance and tolerance. One important aspect that I must mention before moving on to other aspects of Indian literary heritage, it is translation. Of course, it has brought new knowledge from all over the world. But translation also has united variegated literary, linguistic, and cultural traditions of India. By carrying best of literature from one language, region, and culture, containing information about belief systems, practices, religions, literature, and culture to other languages, regions, and cultures of the country, translation has enhanced the awareness about other cultures and belief systems, increased understanding and cooperation, reduced ignorance and bigotry, promoted acceptance and tolerance, and all these together united communities of India. Such unity also brought out literary creations highlighting best practices and thoughts from other cultures of the country into one's mother tongue. If translation was not there, we all would have had different understandings of Indian literary heritage. I mentioned earlier about saint poets. One should address the bhakti movements of the medieval period and their role in social cohesion. But along with the bhakti movements, I also would like to touch upon other movements like Dalit movements, independence movement, emergence of women writers, and continuation of bhakti traditions through continuous interpretations to suit the changing times. The saint poets from Tamil Nadu, Alvars or Nayanmars and others, from Karnataka, Dasas and Shivasharanas and others, from Kerala, Eluchin and Kulasekar Alvar and others, from Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, Vemana, Mulla and Bhadrachalam Ramadasu and others, from Maharashtra, saint poets like Tukaram, Jnanadev, Namdev and others, from Gujarat, Narsingh Mehta and Ganga Sati, Dayaram and others. From North India, Guru Nanak, Lal Ded, Kabir Das, Tulsidas, Ravidas, Ramananda, Mirabai and others. From the eastern and northeastern of India, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shankar Dev, Rama Prasad Sen, Jayadeva and others, and many more from other regions and traditions. They all provided the common purpose and united various communities. The Bhakti movements in this period and in various parts of the country enabled the masses to retrace their cultural roots and empowered them to counter hegemonies of all types in all communities. The devotional literature and bhakti tradition continues till date through a series of interpretations and reinterpretations, not in a linear scale, but jumping across the landscapes and eras. Each interpretation of the previous one or the original brings in new angles and at times newer truths. This continuous process keeps the literary milieu alive, vibrant, and progressive. Socratic methods, interpretations, and reinterpretations are always healthy and ensure that dogmatic structure does not fall in. This is also one of the reasons for Indian literary heritage to keep itself alive and relevant even in 2025. When we talk of social cohesion, unity, etc., it is Dalit literature that did maximum in that direction. Dalit movement, as uplifting the downtrodden, should invoke the memory of Sri Narayana Guru, who single-handedly almost eradicated inequality from the times of Madar Chennaya from Karnataka to Jyotirao Phule of Maharashtra to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar to Namdev Dasal, and the current generation, Dalit literature has come a long way. But no one can equal, leave alone, surpassing the knowledge, writings, and impact of Baba Sahib Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He was one person who had an in-depth understanding of formation and movement of hierarchy and stratification, social structures, social institutions, social movements, and most importantly, human mind. He was not only a sociologist, but also brilliant anthropologist. His understanding of all these is not inferior to anyone in the world. Unfortunately, our country did not utilize his mammoth knowledge properly. But his writings are not merely his legacy, but torchlight for all the future generations. Today, Dalit writings are not confined to one or two languages, but almost all the languages of the country. Definitely, Dalit literature is on the top in the pyramid of Indian literary heritage. Most gladdening aspect of evolution of Indian literature is the emergence of emergence of large number of women writers in all languages. Over a period of centuries, India had women writers in some languages, and they were few and far between at best. Patriarchal structures did not enable women to express themselves freely. In the 20th century, however, women writers, scholars, researchers, and philosophers emerged very strongly in India, broke down all the barriers, and today they are the world beaters. Women writings of India. If one takes the number of women writers and poets in all the languages of the country, would make India as the country with most women writers. Of course, one has to take into account tribal and oral traditions of the country. Again, women writers of India have gone past the feminist literature alone mentality, and today they are boldly dabbling in all the genres. Well, this should not be misconstrued to say women writers are not writing about the lives of women. All I want to say that women writers of India are writing about the lives, thoughts, emotions, and feelings of women, but also writing about countless subjects and bring in the point of view of women in them. They are on the march, taking down all the tags and categorizations. This only augur well for Indian literature. The role of literature in the social movements is often go unaddressed, or at best they are underrepresented. If one goes through the pages of history of all the nations, one can always see the hand of well-written literary creations inspired millions, galvanized them to form a movement, and will be in the front of such movements. Many examples can be given. For want of time, I just would like to mention a handful. The literary creations of Mahatma Gandhi, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, Tagore, Subramanya Bharati, and others inspired Indians in large numbers, instilled in them the central message of freedom and the need for India to gain independence. Rest is history, as the old saying goes. Lakhs of people inspired by these writings and the clarion call in them joined the movement in different shades, and the British Raj could not withstand this multi-layered onslaught. I say multi-layered because the Indian independence movement was not a single or even a homogeneous movement, but had many layers, streams, and subcultures in it. Just like rivers flow into the ocean, they all joined for the common purpose to throw out British Raj. From all the things I have been speaking about, it must be clear that Indian literary heritage is strong, vibrant, and great because it is the most ancient or have some exceptional creations or elements in it. Indian literary heritage is great and magnificent because it is universal in nature and scope. It is all embracing and contains all the streams of thoughts and schools, contains within it greatest philosophies of all time, but very importantly, it impacted people over a long period of time and continued to do so. Greatness of a literary creation is in how well it impacts people, readers, other writers, and publishers, etc. In the same way, the greatness of literary heritage can be gauged by what it has done for society. From the medieval period, how it united communities through movements, gives place to variegated thoughts and schools, continues to remain vibrant, alive, relevant, and still remains universal, as in applicable to all cultures and times. That in nutshell are the reasons why one should go deep into Indian literary heritage, write about it, translate the hidden gems, and bring them into focus of wider audience and celebrate. Celebration of writing, literature, and literary heritage is the celebration of human life. Literature reflects society and many shades of human existence. As such, literature brings out and propagate exciting ideas among others who in turn get inspired by those ideas. All these are not mere words, and anyone can go through the history of Indian literature in all the languages and ascertain the veracity of what I am telling. Obviously, I cannot cover all the aspects of Indian literature, and believe me, that is very vast. And secondly, I cannot elaborate on each and every point I am touching. It will take hours. I sincerely hope my speech does not come across as disjointed because I am running, just touching important points for want of time, and hence hope audience do not find, there is not much audience rather, do not find this a way boring a long lecture. Before concluding, I would like to touch upon two important aspects of Indian literary heritage, genres of literary creations and varieties of literature. When one talks about the length of a literary creation, short like haiku or long epical poem, Indian literature has better versions, sutra literature and itihasas. In the modern time, Sri Aurobindo wrote a really impressive long epic Savitri in English language. In the medieval period, in different regions, we have had attempts at epics. One need not have any doubt about sutra literature. Even prose, and that too about mundane things too have been attempted in sutra form. We have parallels in Tamil language in the form of Tirukkural and Doha in North India. Storytelling is a part of human existence, hence, it would come as no surprise that tales, stories are at the center of Indian literary heritage from ancient time and in different forms, katha in different languages, tales for children, folk tales, tales for amusement, tales for education, tales for different occasions like birth, funeral, before marriage, on the sidelines of war, etc. Even Bhagavad Gita is a story in the sidelines of war. Sadly, most of these forms storytelling are vanishing or have vanished. When it comes to poetry, Kavya literature provides platform for all experimentations, free verse, monologues, musical poetry, poetry for different occasions, devotional poetry, etc. Some of the great saint poets like Shankar Deva from Assam and Narayana Tirtha from Andhra Pradesh have been experimented opera for temple performances and with fresh poems written on the spot for the occasion. Talking of opera, India is a place that established and refined theories and rules for the poetry and performance. Natya Shastra and Tolkappiyam and other ancient treatises established the rules for literature and performance. They set in motion grand sequence of immortal creations through centuries. Plays were written for a book, for stage, for courts, for street plays, for performing in temples, etc. Medieval period is the really golden period for prose writing in India in terms of number of subjects covered, from rules for married people to property division to town planning to agriculture to crime and punishment to history to various sciences including mathematics to ethics to laws to governance to administration, simply encompassing entire spectrum of human endeavor. When it comes to fantasy, supernatural and speculative fiction, prime examples could be the texts that followed Upapuranas. Some were written as part history, some in narration form, some mixed with poetry, etc. Today, many young Indian authors are writing fantasy and science fiction. In the modern period, Indian writers and readers picked up the new genres like novels, short fiction, etc. And today, Indian literature is on ascendance when it comes to all these modern genres. Biographies and autobiographies are also pursued vigorously, writers and readers alike. One curious thing about contemporary literary scenario in India is the increased interest in historical fiction and graphic novels. Hopefully, we will see more authentic and well-written historical fictions in all the languages. As for varieties in this long and vast Indian literary heritage, all of you know about classic form such as novels, stories, plays, criticism, etc. I briefly touched upon religious literature while mentioning Bhakti literature movements. There is also a vast body of spiritual literature that does not limit one to a specific religion. Just like ethical literature, we have Niti Shastras in many languages. Spiritual literature in different languages is universal in nature and appeal. Then we have a variety of histories in almost all the languages. Histories of kings and queens, histories of communities, histories of heroes, histories of gods and goddesses, histories of various seminal events that recur according to native wisdom, histories of various literatures, and so on. One important aspect that people often tend to overlook and ignore is the presence of science literature, ranging from mathematical principles to architecture to astronomy to agriculture to medicine to engineering. These treatises in some languages from the medieval period. Apart from all these, there are indigenous knowledge systems that primarily fall under intangible cultural heritage. These are practical wisdom, passed from one generation to the next. Recently, they are being recorded and scribed, but essentially, people have been ignoring them, saying they are nothing more than hearsays and beliefs. But research on several regional dialects and the information that can be gleaned from those established, and these are worth taking at least one look. I mentioned laws. There is a separate body of literary texts that deal with economics, governance, management, politics, warfare, administration, technology of the day, principles are moral to be followed in dialogues and public spaces, etc. All these go on to make vast and diverse Indian literature. Indian literary heritage encompasses all these components. As I already said, the greatness of this heritage is what it has done for people. Now I have come to a conclusion, and I thank the organizers for inviting me for this third edition of Kerala Legislative International Book Festival and giving me this opportunity. I don't know how much I deserve this honor and addressing this August Assembly. I hope I have not bored you. Thank you, and my best wishes to everyone for a peaceful, happy, and knowledgeable 2025. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Now we invite Sri M.S. Vijayan sir, our additional secretary, to hand over the memento to Dr. Sreenivasa Rao and Dr. Muthulakshmi to accept the same.